as we all know that Lucentis and Avastin has been here for a couple of years. But so far, how we feel about these two anti-VEGF, why we need a new one. This is the slide probably can answer, because this is the slide called Aura study done in Europe. It showed that the injection number is really relevant to the final visual acuity. If you inject seven Lucentis in 2 years, eventually the vision gain just back to where you start. And if you inject 9, still decline the visual acuity. So the injection number is really relevant to the final visual acuity. So that means if you want to maintain your vision gain during your loading phase, you need more injections. But so far, as previous speaker mentioned, that the treatment burden become a big problem. And the answer will be, can we have another anti-VEGF which is better than we have so far? And if you look at the pathophysiology of the whole disease, it's much complicated than we thought. We thought VEGF is the only problem, but actually it's not. There are receptor 1, receptor 2, and receptor 3. Receptor 2 is mainly responsible for angiogenesis in pathophysiology of AMD. However, VEGF-A can bind into receptor 1 and receptor 2. But besides VEGF-A, there are VEGF-B, VEGF-C, and also placenta growth factor, and which can bind into receptor 1, and also galectin-1 can bind into receptor 2. So if you look at the functions of Lucentis and Avastin, which can bind into the VEGF-A only, so despite of that, if you get rid of VEGF-A, you still have placenta growth factor, which can bind into receptor 1, you still have galectin-1 can bind into receptor 2. But if you compare that to the function of aflibercept, also named as Eylea, which can bind in not only the VEGF-A, but also placenta growth factor and galectin-1. So that's the functions of the Eylea, which is better than Lucentis and Avastin. If you look at the concentration in the eye, once you have diabetes, you have PDR, not only VEGF upgrowth, you also have placenta growth factor regulated, and also happen to the branch vessel vein occlusion and central vein occlusion. So just blocking the VEGF-A is not enough. You still need to deal with the placenta growth factor. Otherwise, it will still trigger the whole process. And placenta growth factor is mainly binding to the receptor 1, and which force the VEGF-A can bind into the receptor 2 that trigger the whole process. And the functions of the placenta growth factor is mainly to bind into VEGF-A, then combine with the combine to receptor 1, and combine with the VEGF-A together can trigger the whole angiogenesis. And in the mouse model, show that for the diabetes model, if you're blocking the placenta growth factor, you can reduce the chance of retinal vessel loss, also reduce the chance of pericyte loss, and save the retinal cells. And for the galectin-1, that's binding to the receptor 2, which is the main pathway of angiogenesis. For the galectin-1 binding to receptor 2, which can trigger the endothelium cell proliferation, endothelium cell migration, that's the new vessel formation, and also induce the permeability increase in the endothelium cell. That can cause inflammation, cause tissue edema. And Eylea can block in VEGF-A, placenta growth factor, and galectin-1. Now we don't know exactly the pathophysiology, the whole picture. If you're blocking everything, is there any risk or not? Actually, if you look at the DME clinical trial showed that the arterial thrombotics complications is about the same as we have in the Avastin clinical trial and also Lucentis clinical trial, even equal to that the control groups that's treated with laser. So that means you can block all this without risking patients' life. And this is the paper I would like to highlight up here, because this is the paper made by Huan Long, and actually he's born here and immigrated to the United States in 1980, and he made this paper by injections high levels of Eylea to the vessel to prove the safety. He injects 1 milligram per kilogram. So for the size like me, it will be 70 milligrams of Eylea inject into the vessel and to see how the safety is, and eventually prove there's no safety signal. So if you inject 2 milligrams of Eylea into the eye, very little fluid go to the vessel. For the systemic, of course, there's no safety concern. So aflibercept is a compound combining a lot of pathological molecules. But another thing is that how long can it last? How long can it suppress VEGF-A in the eye? Actually, all these we call them anti-VEGF. But for Lucentis and Avastin, that's the antibody to the VEGF-A. But for the Eylea, it just stimulates the arms of receptor 1 and 2 and form 2 arms, just like the crown of the crab, to holding the VEGF-A from reaching to the receptor. So the action actually not the same. But when you inject these medications into the eye, there's what happens. VEGF-A in the eye concentration is picogram, but if you inject a lot of medicines, that's a milligram. So everything is holding by the anti-VEGF. So you can have function of Lucentis, you can have function of Avastin, of course, you can have function of Eylea. But the half-life is very short. So how long can it last? Well, in the mathematical model by Rosenfeld, showed that Eylea can suppress the VEGF-A about 83 days, and for Lucentis, only 30 days. The theory is mainly based on the molecular size and the half-life, but how about in the real life? This study done in Germany showed that they inject the anti-VEGF in the eye and also check the concentration of VEGF in the patients. Same patients, they check with Lucentis. Same patient, they also check with Eylea. It showed that suppression of VEGF-A for the Lucentis average is 34 days, and for the Eylea, it is 67 days. It's about twice the period you can suppress the VEGF-A. So that means VEGF-A can suppress longer, less treatment burden you will need, less visit burden will happen to you and your patient. So this is the structure of Eylea. It composed of 2 arms, and each arm have 1 domain for VEGF-A receptor 1 for VEGF-A receptor 2. So these two, just like binding to the IgG, that's a human IgG, then binding to the VEGF-A from both sides, keep it from reaching to the receptor. So that's a very strong combination. And this strong combination shows that if you compare with the affinity of these medications with the receptor, show that VEGF-A binding to Eylea very strong, and followed by receptor 1, then followed by ranibizumab, followed by Avastin, followed by receptor 2. So what happens if you inject Eylea into the eye? After several cycles, the concentration is very low. VEGF-A is still holding by Eylea rather than receptor 1. What happens if you inject Lucentis or Avastin into the eye? After several cycles, the level is very low, and eventually the VEGF-A is binding to receptor 1 better than Lucentis and better than Avastin. So you cannot longer to holding the VEGF-A to the anti-VEGF. So that's the reason why EYLEA can have a better and longer action than the rest of the two. And in the clinical trial, it's done in Switzerland. That's the called crossover study. That's in diabetes patients. He take turn, inject 3 injections of Lucentis, followed by shift to 3 injections of EYLEA, then followed by 3 injections of Lucentis. Whenever they shift from Lucentis to EYLEA, shows that retina become thinner and vision better. But if they shift from Lucentis to shift the EYLEA to Lucentis, the vision become worse, and although the retina become thicker. So that based on the same patients and crossover, we know that EYLEA is stronger and better than Lucentis. And this is a study done in some patients with refractory to Lucentis in DME patient, show that this patient vision still can be saved and improved by shifting to EYLEA. So in conclusion, shows that anti-VEGF are not the same. EYLEA show they can have a longer durations of suppression of VEGF-A, and also they can have multiple suppression, not only VEGF-A, but also plasma growth factor and galectin-1, and EYLEA is safe in patients regarding the sustained side effect. Let's shifting the gear to the AMD and PCV. This is a very special issue in Asia, because in the past, we thought AMD is mainly in the Caucasian people, and not so many in Asia. But actually, if you look at the epidemiology study, show the number about the same. And more complicated in Asia is that 1/3 of AMD-like patients actually turn out to be PCV. So can we treat those PCV patients like we treat AMD patients? That's the issue. And if you look at the natural course, natural history of AMD, it shows that the vision drops so fast. So if you look at the baseline visual acuity of these AMD patient clinical trial, on average, the vision is between 0.1 to 0.2, and the vision drops so fast. So we rarely catch those patients with better vision than 0.5. And if you leave untreated, the vision will eventually drop all the way down to 0.05 in 1 year. So that's so-called legal blindness. So if you need to deal with the AMD patient, you need to deal with the patients earlier to maintain the visual acuity from decline. So far, if you look at the case study, that study done in the United States, Lucentis and Avastin in 2 regimens. One is fixed dosing, the other is PRN treatment. It showed that despite you have visual acuity improvement in the first year, but eventually the vision just declined in 5 years. And during the extension phase, 3 years, still injection about 15 times of Lucentis or Avastin, but still cannot save the vision. So that means during the extension phase, even 5 injections per year still cannot save the visual acuity. Can EYLEA do better than that? This is a study of View 1 and View 2. View 1 was done in the United States, and View 2 is for the rest of the world. For the View 2, that's including the Asian people, that's in Japan. For the first time, we can test on the AMD patients in Asia to see whether they can have the similar result as Western country or not. So Lucentis monthly injection is as a reference arm, and we try to test whether EYLEA can inject with less frequency. So there are 2 milligrams every 4 weeks and 2 milligrams every 8 weeks, 0.5 milligram every 4 weeks, following 3 loading injections like Lucentis. And the result is very promising. It showed that the visual acuity about the same. At first, the proposal to the FDA is that non-inferior comparison. That means 10% difference. So if you can reach the 5% difference, they will say you can say equal effect. Actually, Eylea reaching the equal effect. And the beauty of the Eylea injection is that every 4 weeks, no better than every 8 weeks. So the label came to Eylea with 3 loading, then every 8 weeks. That means less injection in the first year, less treatment burden, less visit burden. And also during the second year, that's the CAP-PR injections. That means that PR injection, but if you don't inject the patients for more than 3 months, you're mandatory to do the injection. So in this case, during this second year study, show that vision still can be preserved. And nearly half the patient treated with Eylea actually need only 3 months injection. That means at the time of injection, the retina is still dry, but based on the protocol, they still have to inject. So actually, Eylea can last longer than you thought in nearly half the patients of AMD. So if you look at the extension phase of the Eylea View 1 study, it showed that during the extension phase, each year only need 4 injections. You still can maintain the vision gain in year 1 and year 2. If you compare that with the case study, during the extension phase, each year you inject 5 injections of Lucentis or Avastin, the vision still decline. Obviously, if you choose Eylea, you can have better visual acuity and better maintenance. And for the things, Eylea, no matter if it's monthly injections or every other month, show that anatomical result is better than Lucentis monthly injections. And for the safety, there's no safety signal coming out. And for the thromboembolic complication, also very safe compared with Lucentis. So if you compare that with the rest of the study, show that Eylea injections really very safe for the patients, and there's no safety signal. With the View 1 study and View 2 study summary, that Eylea every other month injection with 2 milligrams in the eye can compare equal to the effects of monthly injections with ranibizumab. And there's no safety signal and there's no safety concern. Then how about PCV? Actually, PCV is involved in about 1/3 of AMD-like patients. It shows very typical from this finding, show that there's more hemorrhage, more extra days, and if you look at ICG, you can see there's a polyps, branching vessel net, and also PED. That's a common feature, which is involved in about 1/3 or nearly half of the AMD-like patients in Asia, but not in Caucasians. Caucasians only have about 10%. What that means. In all the study, if you look at ICG, this patient is AMD patients with classic component and a COC component. But if you look at ICG, you really can tell a lot of information. So if you look at the study, Marina and Anchor, Viv and TAP, or even View study, ICG is not included in the screening follow-up. So that means even in the Western country, ICG is not the gold standard, and ICG is not so popular. So is that ICG required in Asia or not? If you look at the ICG finding of PCV, show a beautiful polyps, branching vessel net, and PED. But if you can treat them like you treat AMD, then you don't need to buy the ICG. That's a very expensive machine. So in the View 2 study, Japan groups also do the ICG on their patients. About 1/3 of patients actually turn out to be PCV. And turn out the visual acuity and also the anatomic results are equal. So this post hoc analysis, we need the perspective clinical trial. So the PLANET study designed mainly for the Asian people, but also including in Europe, Germany, and Hungary. And the study design, they try to show that IDEA can be treated in PCV patients like we treat in AMD without the need of PDT. In the PLANET study, that's a 2-year study, and for those patients with persist polyps and persist leaking, and the visual acuity improved less than 10 letters from baseline, those are the patients can exposed to the PDT. Why we said this? Because there is some concern about the PDT. So the patients in the AVERSE-2 study. Then in the AVERSE-2 study, people exposed to the PDT, actually you don't need to unmask till the end of 2-year study. Actually, you know the patient is exposed to the PDT at month 3 by ICG finding. You can see the laser mark clearly over there, and you can see clearly the choroid capillary being damaged with PDT. The more exposure to the PDT, the more capillary dropout you will find. And this patient's exposed to 7 times of PDT. As you can see from the color fundus, the RP is damaged. You can see the choroid vessel clearly. You look at the autofluorescence, show the laser mark, show the RP being damaged, and there's a black spot on there. If you look at ICG, choroid capillary is clearly lost in the area exposed to PDT. So PDT, that's a very powerful equipment, and not only destroy the PCV, but also destroy the choroid capillary. And PLANET study, that's a 2-year study. In year 2, we do treat and extend, pretty flexible, and we let the investigator to make the decision. And the result is very promising. Less than 5% of patients experience 15-letter loss. If you look at AVERSE-2 study, that's the same number whenever you're exposed to the Lucentis or exposed to the PDT combination therapy. And for the visual acuity, 2 arms are about the same regarding visual gain. And for the OCT study, show that thickness is also the same. So that means without the PDT, you still can reaching the similar visual gain and reaching the similar OCT finding. And if you look at the OCT finding, in the PLANET study, at month 3, about 22% of patients still have fluid. That means nearly 80% of patients is dry, and which can be last till year 2. So that's a very powerful medication which can dry the patient in the PCV. But if you look at the AVERSE-2 study, that's a PCV study. If you inject with Lucentis, only dry 30%. With IDEA, you can nearly dry 80% of patients. So that's a big difference. So we told our colleague that once you encounter patients with AMD light and who respond to Avastin or Lucentis, then ring the bell. That means you might encounter PCV patient, you might do the ICG to refine your diagnosis, but it's not longer the truth. If you choose IDEA as treatment, they show equal response with IDEA to the PCV patient and also to the AMD patient. And another beauty is the PED, which is a common finding in the PCV patient. As you can see, this patient being treated with Lucentis for several injections without any response. But when we shift to the IDEA, PED just flat so quick. And in the PLANET study, 50% of patients have baseline PED, but at end of year 1, less than 5% of patients still have PED. So PED can be flat with IDEA very well, but not with Lucentis or Avastin. Another criticism is about inactive polyps. Actually, inactive polyps happen to the AVERSE-2 study, happen to those patients treated with ranibizumab or PDT. That means once the polyp is gone, part of the patient still have leakage, part of the patient still have fluid on OCT. But if you look at those patients with persistent polyp in average 2 study, still show that some of the patients, despite the polyp still there, but there's no fluid. So the story of polyps equal to leakage, no polyp, no leakage, that's not true. And so in the planet study, it showed that about 80% of patients actually don't have active polyps. And among them, 40% actually polyps is gone. So in the real life, it showed that the polyp closure rate is much better. That's, of course, by the investigator judgment. About 50 to 70% of polyps can be closed by injections of IDEA. And regarding the rescue therapy, PDT, actually less than 20% of patients need PDT rescue therapy in 2 years. For those exposed to PDT, the visual acuity doesn't better than those without. So that means with IDEA treatment, if you cannot dry the retina, if you add on the PDT, actually the visual acuity doesn't show better results. And regarding the polyp closure, there's no difference between the 2 arms. So for the treatment exposure, year 1, that's fixed dosing. So 8 injections on average. And for the second year, that's treat and extend, only 4 injections. So if you treat patients based on the PRN protocol, maybe the injection number is much less than this. So there's no new safety signal in PCV patients. In conclusion, IDEA can treat PCV patients just like you treat AMD patient, and 2 years result show that patients without the rescue therapy or PDT equal effects to those with active PDT. For the visual acuity, 10 letters improve even better than AMD patients, and the anatomic results are very well, and less than 80% of patients still have polyps active. And more than 80% of patients never need rescue therapy. So if you choose IDEA as treatment of PCV, that means you don't need ICG, you don't need a PDT machine, you don't need to rescue your patients to damage their choroid capillary in order to close the polyps. Here's my talk. Thank you for attention.